Welcome to Viewpoints. I'm Heather Isvaron, and today with me is Dr. Mark Lowenthal, author of Intelligence from Secrets to Policy, currently in its 3rd edition. Welcome.
Thank you.
Your book actually is widely used as an introductory text in many universities on the role intelligence plays in national security policy. And our audience wants to know, with the increasing role of state and local intelligence organizations, how has the national intelligence framework changed overall?
Good question. We never really worried about homeland security as an intelligence issue until we got attacked in 2001. And then suddenly we were forced to go to a place that we hadn't been before. So this has a couple of ramifications. Number one, we still don't have a good doctrine for how you do homeland security intelligence. What does it mean? We know how to do foreign intelligence. We don't always get it right, but we know how to do it. We know how to do domestic intelligence. Homeland security, in my view, is somewhere in between there, and we're still working out what that looks like. So that's the first problem. When they created Ambassador Negroponte's job as the Director of National Intelligence, we actually changed the definition of intelligence in law. We used to have foreign intelligence and domestic, and now all we have is one type of intelligence called national intelligence, and it has 3 connected subsets of foreign, domestic, and homeland. So we understand there's a connection. We haven't figured out how to do it yet.
Are there steps being taken? Is there a long-term plan to integrate?
Well, everyone understands it has to be integrated. Charlie Allen, who's the Assistant Secretary for Intelligence and Analysis at Department of Homeland Security, is working on the doctrine for what they call HISINT, Homeland Security Intelligence. I'm working on it with him. We give courses to DHS analysts where we are working out doctrine. Everybody understands you have to do it. The trouble is, to use this terrible cliche, it's like fixing the airplane while you're in motion. Mm-hmm. But that's basically what we're doing.
Right. Many states are putting up fusion centers, and I wondered what you thought about how we could integrate the state fusion centers with the national fusion centers.
Well, it depends on what we mean by the National Fusion Center. I mean, obviously each state has to do it on their own, or regions have to do it on their own. Mm-hmm. The question then becomes, where do they plug into the national apparatus? And I can give you a lot of different answers, and I don't know that any of them are right. Department of Homeland Security assumes it's them. The National Counterterrorism Center, the NCTC, assumes it's them. And I'm not sure either of those is the right answer. I think the main thing is that the Joint Fusion Centers have to work out their doctrine and their processes on their own and figure out what they need to do. And then that'll give them a better sense of where they think they should plug in to the national system. But it can't be driven from the national system down. If we do it that way, this is doomed to failure. It has to come from the JTTFs up, or it is not going to work. It really will not work. This is not an issue where Washington has the answers and is going to give you the answers.
Can you give us an idea of a best practice or where that has worked in a region or a state?
I'm not that familiar with the individual JTTFs yet. I mean, I think the idea that they understand that they have to fuse intelligence, that they have to bring together policemen and first responders, health officials, they're beginning to get their hands on the idea of what it looks like. And part of the problem is it's also very individualistic. If you have a state in the Midwest, you worry a lot about agricultural terrorism.
Right.
If you have a big city, you worry a lot about urban terrorism. And most states are large enough that they're going to worry about lots of different terrorism. And you're not going to succeed if you're trying to play chess with the terrorist and say, well, he's going to come here, not going to go here. You will succeed if you have a flexible plan that allows you to respond to a variety of emergencies. But you're not going to win if you just say, well, this is the one, this is it, which they will always outthink you. This is a quote from Napoleon. When an army is on the march, the commander should always ask himself, what will I do if the enemy appears in my front, in my rear, on my left, on my right? And if you don't have a good answer, there's something wrong with the way your army is set up. I think that's not a bad model.
In your book, you had some metaphors for the way people commonly refer to intelligence, and I like the metaphor of the mosaic. Can you explain a couple of those?
Well, I got into the metaphor business because of this, you'll forgive me, this incredibly stupid metaphor of connecting the dots,
Right.
which drives me to distraction, which it just is so inapt, and it so totally fails to describe what we do. Our dots don't come with numbers. They don't come in order. We never know if we have all the dots or some of the dots. We don't have little internal pictures or anything like that. And I thought mosaics was closer because, all right, every morning the analyst comes in, he or she gets a tray full of colored glass. It's in different sizes, different shapes, different colors, and they're told, all right, Heather, make a picture. I don't even tell you what the picture's supposed to be. It's not like a jigsaw puzzle where you've got the picture on the cover and you say, oh, I got it. So you start assembling them and fitting them together, and you got a couple that aren't working at all. You come back the next day, we give you a tray back, but we changed a lot of the glass on you. You say, all right, keep working on your picture.
Right.
That's what happens to you every day. You're working on pieces and bits of information. Yes, you are trying to connect them. They're not dots, though. But the picture keeps moving. The Al-Qaeda we face today, we think, is markedly different from the Al-Qaeda that attacked us 5 years ago. Now, we don't know this for sure. We have a pretty good guess. So the glasses have changed. And so that's why I thought the shifting mosaic metaphor was a better metaphor.
Right. Well, not only just with Al-Qaeda, but you have the prison system and our own homegrown terrorists.
Right.
And the Salafists in suburbia, if you will. Can you frame that a little bit and how that integrates with, the state and local fire chief, police chief on the beat trying to figure out how to make sense of this very complicated mosaic?
Well, actually, let's take the examples of what happened in London and Madrid. One of the first questions the two police forces in those two cities asked after they were attacked was, homegrown, Al-Qaeda connected? What's the right answer? Because that's important. Now, initially in London, they ran into a dead end and they assumed homegrown, which is scary. It's
Right.
actually the scarier answer. It means I have people in my society who have gone bad, have no visible attributes, and have decided to attack us. Now, that's frightening. The British are fairly well convinced now, I think, that three of the four, at least, were in Pakistan for some training. In the Madrid case, it's fairly clear that this had an Al-Qaeda connection. So the most likely model you have is franchise operations, where they have some connection to Al-Qaeda, but what we don't know is Al-Qaeda saying to the local groups, all right, time for you to attack, time for you to attack, or are they just prepping them and saying, you select the target, you select the opportunity. But one of the things that's different about us than Europe is that we are much better at integrating people into society. We are still an immigrant nation. And Western Europe is not used to taking in immigrants, not taking them in and making them full-blown Spaniards or Brits or whatever it is. And so the populations behave differently. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have threats, that we don't worry about the radicalization of prisoners. We also have rules about what you can do. I mean, everybody has First Amendment protections, and so it makes it very hard. I think that the police understand this. I think the police, certainly the police officers that I've met in the last couple of days have a very good sense of what they need to look at and the limits of what they're allowed to do.
Right. Well, certainly it's a very complex issue, and it goes, intelligence starts from, the person on the street making observations to then law enforcement and public safety, and then up to the more regimented CIA, FBI kind of thing. I mean, it's very complicated, and I think your metaphor of the mosaic is very important. But within the state and local framework, can you frame the debate of clearance issues within agencies?
Yes, clearances.
I know, this is a big issue.
Well, all right. The intelligence community looks for secrets. We have rules to protect the sources of our secrets. That's what clearances are based on. That I'm going to let you know secret methods, secret sources, and I don't want you to tell anybody else. That's why we have clearances. There is an interesting debate as to the degree to which the state and locals really need that kind of access. And I'm not convinced that they do, except for the fact that the national agencies tell them they do. I'll give you an example. I remember when Congress created DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and Governor Ridge was appointed the first secretary. A bunch of members of Congress were demanding, and I mean demanding, that the Director of Central Intelligence, George Tenet, was going to share his sources and methods with Secretary Ridge. And George said, no, I'm not. He said, I'm going to pass along the information, the intelligence that I know is significant. And if I pass it to Secretary Ridge, then he knows, you got to watch this one, because the director decided that of the many threats we had today, this is one he gave me. And Secretary Ridge said, absolutely right. I don't need to know the source. I don't need to know it was a spy. I don't need to know it was an intercept. I need to know I got a problem. I think that's the right model. I don't know that the state and local people need clearances to do their work. They need intelligence. And you can give them the intelligence without revealing the sources and methods. Now, part of the problem with getting clearances in this country is the psychology of the clearance. We practice security to do risk avoidance, as opposed to practicing security to do risk management. And if your goal is risk avoidance, then nobody gets cleared very quickly, and fewer people get cleared because you don't want anything bad to happen. And we know that that system has failed. We've had enough spies in this country who were Americans who were cleared, so you're not going to avoid risk, so you ought to figure out how to manage risk and make the process less onerous.
What suggestions would you have then for the state and local, say a fire chief or a police chief who has a clearance and can't bring that down to the officers within the agency?
See, I feel their pain, as somebody once said. I don't know if they can solve this individually. I think what they should do is, if this begins to replicate itself, if this happens in Chicago, in LA, or in Monterey, they have, for example, there's the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And after all, it's international, it's not all U.S. They have to go as a body to the Congress, to Secretary Chertoff, and say, you're not helping. We can't do the job you expect of us because you have these rules about something that I'm allowed to know, and I can't tell my analyst who's on the street, who's watching for this stuff, and that's wrong. I think that they're gonna, but they can't. I don't think individually it'll work. There has to be sort of a mass to tell them that the system is just, the premise is wrong.
So are there people that are talking about these issues and kind of coming up with strategies and policies to kind of resolve some of the different issues we've discussed today?
Well, there's lots of people talking about them. On the clearance issue, most people just end up getting frustrated, especially for people who've been professionals for 20, 30 years, and suddenly they're finding out that they're inadequate because they can't get a clearance. That just makes people crazy. On the JTTFs, I think they're thinking some really interesting, good thoughts. Their problem is this issue of how do we connect to the federal system. And I've spent a lot of time talking with a bunch of students the last couple of days about what might be the right answers to that. So I think people are thinking along, but as I said, as I said at the beginning, a major part of the problem is we've never done this before.
Right.
We're in a wholly new and different place, and that's a big issue.
In wrapping up the session, what challenges do you see on the horizon for the next 2 to 5 years in intelligence, both on the national level and the state and local?
I think our largest challenges are personnel issues. On the national level, 50% of all the analysts in the intelligence community have less than 5 years experience.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a big wow. I mean, the workforce is getting younger, it's not getting older. And so they're just less experienced, and that's a huge issue. We're not brilliant at training them and educating them. We're good when we take them into the system. After that, we're not very good. We're not good at their career management, and they won't stay. They won't get to be old analysts unless you fix those things. Another problem is, all right, CIA is hiring more analysts. Porter Goss and Mike Hayden were both told by the president, increase the number of analysts by 50%. FBI is creating a new intel division. They're hiring analysts. DHS is standing up an analytical component. They're hiring analysts. DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, is hiring analysts. Where are all these analysts coming from? And these are all analysts who are going to have to be cleared.
Right.
All right, so now we're going down to the state and local level, forming all these JTFs. Where are the analysts coming from? I mean, we're going to reach an end of the pool. Not everybody is suited to be an analyst. There are only so many people out there who can be, should be, want to be analysts, and that is a severe problem. Once you get past that problem, I think the other large problem is the doctrine problem. What does Homeland Security Intelligence mean? What does it look like? What do you do? It has to be more than don't lose 4 more planes and 3 more buildings. That's not a doctrine. That's a reaction to a bad day. And that to me becomes a very significant issue, is if you don't solve that, how do you know what to write? How do you know who you're writing for? How do you know who to give it to?
Well, clearly there are a lot of complex issues we discussed today, a lot of work to be done. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.